I am honored and humbled to be in the presence of Wotan, the king of the gods, otherwise known in his mortal persona as James Morris, the wonderful opera star. We are here in Santa Fe now, where you're singing a very different kind of a role, of playing the doctor in Barber's Vanessa. Can you tell us a little bit about the character, your interpretation of the doctor?
Yeah, sure. The doctor, it's a great role. I love it. It's not a huge part. I mean, when you compare it to the Wagner roles and everything, but it's multifaceted. It's a really fun role to portray. It's multifaceted. It's a not real heavy, serious role like Wotan or any of those. And he's the one little bright spot in the whole story. Vanessa is a beautiful opera, but it's very depressing. Very depressing story, and everybody's very serious. And whenever the doctor comes on, it's like a little breath of fresh air, So it's nice. And he's a very old family friend, Vanessa's family, and he has recollections of when there used to be parties there, and when life was much gayer, and it's just a wonderful character. Then in the second act, he has a great scene, the drunk scene. At
the very beginning.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
yes.
And that's a lot of fun. I tell everybody I've been practicing a drunk scene my whole life. But then coming up after that, when Erica has hurt herself and things become very serious, then the doctor becomes very reflective. He says he's always known that he's a bad doctor, and now he doesn't even think he's a good poet anymore. He always fancied himself as a poet, but since he failed to read what was going on in Erica's heart, he thinks that
line struck me as tremendously ironic, in that he's trying to read the hearts of people who are crazy, in a way, and he thinks that's a failing in him.
Yeah, it's poignant. It's very poignant. And then at the very end, in the last scene, his humanity really shows through when he has this little soliloquy, supposedly talking to Vanessa and remembering her childhood. So it's a really wonderful part. You get to be funny, you get to be cheerful, and then at the same time very reflective and very poignant. So that's a lot of fun.
It was a wonderful performance. I saw it on opening night, and it was wonderful having that comic relief.
Like I said, it's
really
kind of a
helped.
depressing piece, but really a great piece. Barber, what he did with the orchestra and everything, and I think this production is really a nice production, given the setting here at Santa Fe Opera and what they're able to do stage-wise and everything. It worked really well.
Well, I have to ask you about singing Wotan. I'm sure for many of us, you will always be Wotan. I know you've sung so many other roles, but that's the one everyone remembers particularly.
Well, it's nice to have something that you're remembered for more than other things. I mean, the movie actors or TV actors that work their whole career, and then there's that one role that they get known for. No, it's very gratifying. No, I loved singing Wotan for many, many years. It was my favorite role. And then eventually I kind of got edged out a little bit by Hans Sachs in Meistersinger. And if you had ever told me that would be my favorite role, I would have said you were crazy.
Oh,
but
why is that?
Well, it took me a long time to really get interested in it. And Wagner itself, I grew up cutting my teeth on the Italian and French repertoire, and when the Wagner came along, I thought, I like it orchestrally, but singing, I had to be convinced, and I sort of pushed it away for a while. And but then once you get into it, it's very addictive. Wagner fans are a whole different breed.
I have to confess to being one.
Yeah, right, and. But rightfully so. I mean, it's so different from anything else, and it gets under your skin. After I first started singing The Ring, I started with Valkyria first, and then I went back to the Met and I was doing, I forget about Lucia or something, and all of a sudden it just sounded so rinky-dink. And but I said to myself, I don't want to be a Wagner snob. A lot of Wagner fans say that's the only composer, But no, it's been a lot of fun. And the character, when I was working with Hans Hodder, he said, Wotan, you have to do it about 100 times before you begin to understand the character. I haven't gotten there yet to 100, so I guess I haven't begun to understand the character.
Oh, really?
But close to it, I would think.
I would think,
But anyway, it's great. And the fact that you get to, over the space of 3 operas, to portray this one character and a different development in the character, from the brash young god who just thinks he's going to live forever and can do whatever he wants and break whatever treaties he wants and everything, to the very human character in Valkyrie, the humanity between him and Brunhilde. And then in Siegfried, the wise old man, the old sage, who just sort of snickers at the youth and the brashness of youth, So it's a development which is really fun to portray. But then Meistersinger came along, and everybody kept saying, you have to do Hans Sachs. You do Wagner, and then Wotans, they do Hans Sachs, right? So I went into it grudgingly. A lot of words in that part. And my score ended up flying across the room many times. And it took me about 5 years to learn it, because I was doing it piecemeal, off and on, because it's such a long piece. Any other bass baritone role you can get through in a coaching session in 50 minutes, And the Valkyrie Wotan, depending on the conductor, an hour and 15 minutes or so. But Hans Sachs, just cue to cue, your line to the next line to the next line without anything else, was 2.5 hours. So that's it was an undertaking. But again, the character, that's what really gets me, the humanity of Hans Sachs. I always said that he's the kind of character I think we all would like to be, But anyway. So those are my 2 favorites, But like you said, there's a lot of others. So
many years ago, I had the privilege of talking with the great Helden tenor Jess Thomas, and I said to him, to us mortals, it really seems superhuman to be able to sing these huge Wagner roles. I'll ask you the same question. Is there anything in particular that you do to prepare, physically, to prepare for those roles?
Not really. I mean, there's
no cans of spinach or push-ups?
No. There's the old joke, which actually is a true story, when some girl came up to Birgit Nielsen and said, Miss Nielsen, I'm going to be doing Isolde. Do you have any advice? And she said, get comfortable shoes. So that's it. I mean, it's a long night, but the stamina involved, it's that there is stamina involved. I mean, it's a long sing, but Wagner usually does give you breaks, not so much in Jess Thomas's repertoire. He sings and sings and sings. But for example, with Wotan, you have big sections, and then you have time off, and then another big section. So it's not quite so bad. Except the last act in Meistersinger, he's on stage practically the whole time. So that's where it's kind of a test. But by that time, you're sort of going on autopilot anyway. So but no, it's just the length of the roles and the size of the orchestra, the Wagner orchestra. So you have to have a big voice to get over that.
Right.
But that's another thing too. A lot of conductors really don't observe Wagner's actual dynamic markings, and they play everything loudly. But if you look at Wagner's markings, there's very rarely forte when the singers are singing. It's all mezzo forte. One nice piece of advice Hans Hodder gave me when I was first studying with him. He said, now there are 2 or 3 places in the ring where you'll never be heard, so don't even try. So don't kill yourself,
Let me ask you this. Singing at Bayreuth, is it easier singing at Bayreuth because the sound is reflected towards the singers as Wagner had intended?
I've never actually sung in Bayreuth.
You never have?
No, I auditioned there, and it was quite an experience because the orchestra is under the stage and the piano was under the stage for the audition. This was back in '87 for a new ring in '88 with Harry Kupfer. And they wanted me to do it, but I was already contracted to do Flying Dutchman here in Santa Fe in '88. And also I just spent 7 years in a row in Salzburg, and I wanted to have 1 year in my own country. And they wanted a 5-year commitment, which I couldn't do. And it was a lot of things. But basically I didn't want to break the contract here in Santa Fe, because Santa Fe is very special to me, and I try not to break contracts anyway, and they were doing Dutchman just for me. So I turned him down, and Wolfgang Wagner got his nose bent out of joint, so never been asked since, but anyway.
I see. That would be the only reason. That would be the only reason.
No.
Do you have any pet theories of vocal training, vocal technique, especially regarding singing Wagner, that you could pass on to young singers?
Well, it's the main thing I try to get across to my students is just, of course, with the breathing and the support. I mean, as far as technique is concerned, I'm not going to go into all that here, but you have to have that solid foundation. A lot of people just breathe for each phrase, and they don't think of the overall page of music. You have to have a support and a breath that continues through just more than just one phrase. And then the placement of the voice, just always try and keep it high up in the upper areas of what we call the mask, the cheekbones and hard palate. And that really projects the voice out to the audience. There are a lot of really wonderful voices, but they keep them back in their throat, and it sounds great when you're standing right next to them, but it doesn't project out to the audience. So that's the main thing. It's a placement of the voice and the support, the breathing and support. The only thing I can say, I can pass along what was told to me by Rosa Poncel many years ago. Just try not to go too far, too fast, too soon. You got to take it a little bit at a time. It's very tempting in this day and age. Back in Rosa's day, you traveled by boat, and you basically spent an entire season with one company, And nowadays, with the airplanes, and you're in one city one day and one city another day, and over in Europe anyway. It's hard to turn down things when they come up. Young singers say, "Oh wow, they want me to do Tristan. I'm going to go do Tristan," and they shouldn't touch it for another 10 years. So it's things like that, but it's all individual. So it's hard to make a blanket statement.
Do you find it any more difficult singing here in Santa Fe with the altitude than at sea
Well, I'll put
level?
it this way, they have oxygen tanks in the wings.
I know that. I've seen them.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I haven't really had any problems with it on stage. I've noticed at other places, like trying to sleep, and sort of gasp for breath a little bit. But actually on stage, I haven't noticed it. But I know it does affect a lot of people. I've been here several times. I was an apprentice here in '69, and then I sang here in '81, several roles. Then I was here several times with my wife, who sang here, Susan Quitmeyer. And then the last time I actually sang here was in '88 for that Dutchman instead of Bayreuth. But then I was here last year, last year for 2 weeks teaching. But it's such a great place. I love it. That would, in my mind, that would be the only possible drawback of retiring here would be the altitude. I've heard of some people that had to give up their homes and move away because of it.
Well, where do you go from here? What's next for you?
The next thing I do is Lulu at the ENO in London. But I have a few weeks in between. I teach at Manhattan School of Music in New York. I'm going to be away from them for 2 months, October and November. But my wife, who also teaches, she's going to take my students over while I'm gone, which is very good. But I have about 4 weeks before I go over there, so I'll get them ready for her.
How do you find learning Lulu?
Oh my God. The first time, well, the only other time I've done it, I did it 6 years ago at the Met. I'll put it this way, I lost money on that job. Because it was only 3 performances, and I spent so much money learning it. I had 3 or 4 trips over to Cardiff to work with a coach over there, who was the head of the company at the time, and John Fisher, who's one of the greatest coaches in the world. And then another great coach, my coach in New York, who I worked with, Josh Green, and he was with me like every day. And we'd go out to have dinner or lunch, whatever, and we'd be speaking the lines back and forth across the table. The waiters would go by looking at us, you know. So between that and all that expense and travel and hotels, and at one point I had to rent an apartment in New York City because we live outside in New Jersey, so that I could work with Josh in the mornings and the evenings and then do the Met things during the day. So it was a big expenditure for 3 performances. So, and now I'm going through the same thing because at the NO they do everything in English. So relearning it in English. Ordinarily I would say, hey, I'll do anything in English, it'll be easier than German. But the German was already there. So we shall see. So I'm there October and November.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
It is a great pleasure
Pleasure
to
for
talk
me,
with you.
and I love this area of the country so much. Get out here whenever possible.
Oh,
So
please come back and sing anytime.
I told him
role at all.
here, you don't have to twist my arm. So, you know. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay.